Hi guys, this is gsm.com and I'm here with a review of the Motorola Edge 20 Lite, a mid-range phone which is affordable and has a 108 megapixel camera at the backside. Now at the same time it comes with a ready for feature, making it more versatile and productivity oriented. It also provides quite the large battery life and it has a pretty good looking package, especially if you have not the version we have here, but rather the green one, which you can see in this picture here. So Motorola Edge 20 Lite was launched with the whole Edge 20 trio last fall basically, and it's the most affordable of the triplet. It comes with a 6.7-inch OLED screen and a Dimensity processor, and let's get straight to the review. Now, we have here a sort of frosted plastic at the back side with a camera module that somehow reminds me of the Xiaomi Mi 11 series. The back side draws quite a few fingerprints and the camera protrudes a bit. I would say enough to make it wobble on a flat surface. As you can see here, it wobbles a bit, but the case bundled in the box, which you saw in the unboxing, helps level up the back side. I would say the grip is quite fine, even though one-hand usage may be cramped by how long this handset is. It's also got a water repellent protection, which Motorola has been applying a lot these days, measures 8.3mm in thickness and weighs a decent 185 grams. Now the hues in which it's available are eclectic graphite, which is this one, or better said electric graphite, and lagoon green. It has a curved backside towards the edges, making it a more grippier experience, and I would say that's about it. I would say also that the power button is a bit higher than I would have wanted to. My finger always searches it here. It's actually here. Now, aside from that, we have here a 6.7-inch OLED screen. The bezels aren't bad, aren't very thick. Aside from the chin, it's a Full HD Plus resolution and 90Hz refresh rate, as well as HDR10 Plus support. The punch hole is a bit, I would say, medium sized, not the biggest in the world, but also not the smallest, and the viewing experience will be put to the test right about now. Okay, so we got this video here, which is showing us some pretty vivid colors, a very crisp image. This is quite a bright panel. It's one of the quality OLEDs. It's got wide view angles, as you can tell for yourself. And the contrast is actually quite solid, even on a very sunny day. Everything is also pretty well calibrated. It doesn't go overboard with the vivid colors, so that's nice to see in the case here. So all in all, an excellent panel, considering the price tag you're paying, about $350. The pixels have a pentile matrix arrangement, and when it comes to the brightness, we measured it and achieved 577 lux units, which I would say it's quite impressive, and I would say unexpected after a few Motorola phones, which were a bit less impressive in this department. It goes above the OnePlus Nord 2 Galaxy A52, stays below the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite 5G and the Redmi Note 10 Pro. Now the screen you're seeing here has a bunch of customization options for the panel. You go to the display, you have your dark theme, night light, adaptive brightness, styles, full screen, peak display, screen timeout, but the most important is colors. You can opt for saturated or natural. You also have a color temperature slider, and refresh rate can be set to 60 or 90 Hz depending on what your needs are. Okay, so that's about it as far as the screen is concerned. I would say it's a win. And then we go inside the phone for the other specs, and we find the CPU, which is a MediaTek Dimensity 725G, 7nm octa-core, also present on the Galaxy A32 5G and the Oppo A53 5G. It's got a Mali G57MC3 GPU, and as far as the RAM goes, let's see, 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage, plus microSD, which is always good news. Another piece of good news is that we are not experiencing lag here. No matter how many apps you're running and what you're doing, you'll never encounter lag. And that's one reason to rejoice about the future-proof aspect of the phone. Games also run pretty fine. Now, we also did some benchmarks, so let me show you these. I'm going to start with Antutu 8. In Antutu 8, we surpassed the Redmi Note 9 Pro and also the Redmi Note 10 Pro, which is a bit more relevant, and the Nokia X20 5G. We stayed below the Galaxy A72 4G and the Realme 8 Pro, while in Geekbench 5 multi-core, we're just above the Galaxy A72 4G and the Moto G50, also surpassing the Realme 8 Pro, staying below the Poco M3 Pro and the Realme 8 5G, also Poco X3 NFC. Now the GPU, which I mentioned before, is put to the test with this benchmark, 3D Mark Slingshot Extreme ES 3.1. We're just above a Realme 8 and also above Poco X3 NFC, and we are also defeating the Realme 8 Pro. We stayed below the Galaxy A52 5G, Moto G60 and the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite 4G. So basically it can fight the other cheap phones with 108 megapixel cameras, and I'm talking about the Redmi Note 10 Pro and the Realme 8 Pro. Those are landmarks when it comes to cheap 108 megapixel camera phones. Now, temperature is also an important matter here. In benchmarks we achieved 33.1 degrees Celsius, which by no means shows overheating, so no trace of that. And in gaming, 34.9 degrees Celsius, once again, zero traces of overheating here. And now let's talk about the battery. It's a 5000 mAh unit, which promises about 2 days of medium usage. We start off with the video playback test, in which we achieved an impressive 17 hours and 39 minutes, which means this handset is able to surpass the Redmi Note 10 Pro and the Galaxy A52 5G, but it stays below the Realme 8 Pro and the Galaxy A72 4G. When it comes to continuous usage, we're at the 15 hours and 34 minutes mark. Once again impressive, cracking top 25 all time. We've tested 500 phones, so there you have it. Above the Galaxy A52 5G and A52s, and also above the Redmi Note 10 Pro. So between the mid-ranger, it sits quite nicely. Below the Realme 8 Pro by 11 minutes, which is still pretty good, and below the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite 5G. The charging isn't any record breaker at 1 hour and 25 minutes, it's just decent, I would say even long for today's standards, and after 30 minutes you're all set for a 55% charge. The settings host a battery saver feature, adaptive battery, and even optimized charging and overcharge protection, which is nice to see. On the acoustics front, the first shocking aspect is the fact that we have a FM radio, which I haven't seen on a phone for a while now, and we also have an audio jack here and a singular speaker at the bottom. We don't have a dual speaker setup, I mean we do not have another speaker at the top side, or the earpiece isn't involved in the musical experience. But what we do have are a bunch of extra settings and options here. Let's see if we can actually be able to find them. Effects, basically. They're these ones, and you can do some tweaks from here for the bass, treble, vocalizer, and flat, depending on what your needs are. And now I think it's time we listen to some music. I have it prepped here, so here we go. Okay, so first things first, the sound is very loud, so loud it gets a bit distorted at top level. I would recommend using about 80% or 70% or the full strength of the speaker to enjoy the experience. Not much of a bass here, but the high notes and the voices were satisfying, so there you have it. Those are my impressions. In games it gets even louder, if you can believe it. So these are the decibel meter tests. 87.6 decibel with an acoustic sample test. It's quite impressive. It's above the Realme GT Neo 2 and the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite 5G, below the Realme GT Master Edition and the OnePlus Nord N10 5G. And check out the gaming result, 103.3 decibels, very hugely loud, one of the loudest phones over the past years, above the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite 5G and Galaxy A52 5G, below ZTE Axon 20 and the Moto G100. And now let's talk about the camera. First of all, we have the cutout here for a selfie shooter. It's a 32 megapixel camera that shoots full HD videos and has f2.2 aperture. On the back side, this camera module, it feels like a resemblance to the Xiaomi Mi 11. There are 3 cameras here. The star of the show is definitely the 108 megapixel shooter with f1.9 aperture and 0.7 micron pixels. Also, face detection autofocus. There's the ultra-wide camera afterwards, an 8 megapixel shooter with f2.2 aperture, which supposedly also does macro. so it should have a sort of autofocus. And finally, this small fellow 2 megapixel bokeh shooter with f2.4 aperture. There's an LED flash here, probably dual LED, and this whole array is basically the camera from the Moto G60, which we tested recently. And we also have 4K 30 frames per second video capture and modes like spot color, pro, cutout, portrait, night vision, and some AI features. Now the gallery itself will be found here in the photos section, and we start off with beautiful scenery. This one was taken at the end of the fall, which looks closer to the early fall on account of global warming. Here we have a bunch of selfies, which I would say are pretty expressive. They show the mood of the character being captured here, but they're not very quality in details, and I would say even the colors are a bit warmer than they should be. They do express the joy of the person, but the camera doesn't impress at first sight. The way the light falls on the face is probably the biggest asset here. Now, we do have some nice close-ups of flowers, there's that, and throughout the gallery, you'll notice that the close-ups are one of the strong points of the handset. These are nighttime shots. Let's go to the daytime ones. This selfie is actually a bit of a failure. It's too gray to be taken into account, and check out these close-ups. Success, success again, a perfect focus, and a lot of details in this capture. So if you want close-ups, rest assured that the main camera can take it, while the macro camera is a bit of a letdown if you try to use it for proper macros like we did here, and I actually prefer the close-up camera. And more attempts at close-ups and macros. By the way, impressive textures and colors all around, even though at times some of these colors may be a bit too intense for my liking. Okay, so here we have, this is a regular shot, and this is the ultra-wide shot, which is a bit darker and with softer details on the sides. We gotten accustomed to that every time we see an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera. Even more selfies here, and I still failed at being impressed, and I've seen better, much better on the Galaxy A series, and if I remember correctly, even some Xiaomi's, even ones from 2 years ago. Okay, so once again, regular shot and ultra-wide shot, this time keeping the center area pretty clean and the colors were represented. The sky was also well rendered in the images we have here. The zoom may seem impressive on the phone screen, strictly on this small screen, but on a PC you'll see quite a bit of noise. I would say that 3x zoom is enough to tolerate here. And once again, if you're only using the main camera and if you want details and colors, you may be all set. That should be good enough for you. But if you want a high performance ultra wide camera, this 8 megapixel shooter may not feel like enough in 2022. But the colors are pretty spot on with all of the cameras. That's the daytime capture. In a nutshell, I would say that we're pretty close to the level of the Realme 8 Pro minus the zoom and the Redmi Note 10 Pro. We did take the shots in a very cloudy day, while those two phones were used back in May, so they had a lot of sun. This one can rival them, but give or take 10% in favor of the Xiaomi and the Realme. Now let's talk about low light capture. Okay, so when it comes to night mode, there's one thing you should remember here when it comes to the low light pictures. They're only viable if you're using the night mode, otherwise they're not memorable and they're prone to problems, artifacts and weird color hues every now and then. I mean, on this small screen they may look fine, but in reality, as you can see, the ultra wide capture is disappointing, the street light halos are amplified a lot, there's a lot of noise and dark areas, so definitely forget the ultra wide camera and stick to the night mode for the main camera, even though at times it may make the image a bit too warm color-wise. So you can see here the typical mode, sans night mode, and here the night mode, which makes things a bit more orange and colored in a, well, warmer hue than usual, close to orange. However, you're gaining details in the architectural areas of your captures. So that's the trade-off, warmer colors, but also more light. Definitely a regular capture without night mode, and this is the night mode, which feels like an entirely different affair. You can have your pick, but my thing is that only the night mode matters here. You can forget about the other regular captures at night. So let's talk about videos now. We have 12 of them and we have quite a few selfie videos to glance at. Let's check out this one because it's a bit longer. I mean, it may look fine on this small screen, but in reality I'm pretty unhappy with everything, starting from the intense contrast to the focus. Stabilization is fine. I would say, if I'm being generous, that it can maybe compete with the Galaxy A51, but not quite. That one films in 4K and it's a bit more satisfying in details. So that's the selfie video. Time for the main camera video. And this is the Full HD clip. It lacks in details. The zoom is underwhelming. It's quite exposed on account of a very strong and powerful sun. So everything becomes too bright, overblown. I feel the need to tone it down from the player so you can see what's going on here. And then we switch to a darker scenery. This one, a cloudier day. Here you can see that things aren't as bright. And this time we're testing the stabilization with, I would say, pretty good results. Keep in mind, we're ascending stairs and the stabilization can take it. There's no optical limit stabilization here, just a digital one. I would say a pretty good one for a mid-range phone. Okay, other videos, we have some panoramic ones, but if you want quality clips, definitely skip Full HD because they're truly noisy, so only 4K can cut it if you want a proper challenge. Okay, so this is a focus test, not a very successful one. Let's try another video here. This is a 4K one. As you can see, it's shakier. That's the first thing you notice. Poor zoom and shakiness. However, clearly crisper than a Full HD one. And finally, there is the focus test here, which I'm not exactly convinced by. Let's check it out. Alternating between the subject in the foreground and the background has a few difficulties, but in the end it gets it. Not as fast as expected and as fast as I've seen on some mid-range phones, but finally it gets it. Okay, and that's the daytime capture. I would say not very impressive. I would say rather typical mid-range, not memorable. Somehow comparable to the Realme 8 Pro, but not quite. And definitely below the Galaxy A52 and A51 even, which shot quality crisp 4K videos last year. It's in the same league as the Oppo Reno Lite phones. Maybe Reno 4 Lite, Reno 5 Lite. If there's a Reno 6 Lite, maybe comparable to those models. Okay, I think we're pretty much done with the camera here. The star of the show remains the close-up of the 108 megapixel shooter. Now it's time to address the connectivity. We start off with the Wi-Fi, which is sadly not Wi-Fi 6, but rather Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi dual band. There's 5G here, there's dual nano SIM card slot, there's Bluetooth 5.0, there's GPS, GLONASS, Beidou and Galileo. There's NFC for your payment needs, there's FM radio, and there's an USB-C 2.0 port at the bottom, and also calls were pretty loud and clear as expected from a Motorola phone. After all, Motorola invented the mobile phone 40 years ago or something like that. Okay, so we also did a bunch of speed tests. We have them all here. And as you can see, we got a pretty impressive result in the 4G and 5G test. 477 megapixel downloads, 69.1 megapixel uploads. Wi-Fi not as impressive, 337 over 338 megapixel. So that's about it. On the software front, you've seen us review a ton of Motorola phones, and this one has the exact same features software-wise. I'm talking about the Google feed on the leftmost home screen. I'm talking about Android 11 in a stock experience. Everything is stock here, starting with the widgets, the drop-down area with quick settings and notifications here. So stock Android, nothing out of the ordinary. No bloatware in the app drawer area. Motorola's only involvement is the Moto app, the MyUX as they call it. You can personalize your experience with wallpapers, even interactive ones, and also styles. Here you can tweak the fonts, the colors, icon shapes and layout. Then we got your gestures, quite a few of them, aside from the navigation ones I'm using right now. Then you got your tips. Let's not forget the display. With Pick Display and Attentive Display, one replaces always on display and the other one basically keeps the phone screen on while you're looking at it. These are the gaming features and tools which block accidental touches and notifications. For example, we also have the audio effects which you saw before, and some media controls, which is a nice way of changing track when the screen is off. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And for productivity, we have something extra. It's called Ready For. Basically, what you're going to do is install an application on your PC, scan the QR code, and everything that happens on this phone becomes mirrored to your personal computer, either in a window, sort of like a secondary desktop, or full mirror. Everything that happens here also happens on your PC. And that's about it as far as Ready For is concerned. Now it's time for the pros and cons related to the phone. It's time for the verdict, and here we go. So Motorola Edge 20 Lite has on its side the grip, the price, and the build. First of all, it comes with a lovely green hue, which sadly we do not have, but there's out there, and as you can see here, it's quite lovely. It has a pretty bright screen, an okay performance. It's got a solid main camera, the 108 megapixel shooter I kept mentioning before. Loud speaker, great close-ups, a pretty okay video capture, and I would say above expectation stabilization when walking around and filming. Also night mode does its job fine, fast connectivity, and Ready For is always a plus. So those are the pros. On the cons, the backside draws fingerprints. We don't have 120 Hz refresh rate, even though some similarly priced phones have it. Charging a bit on the long side. No stereo speakers, not much bass here. It's a long format phone, so maybe not the comfiest one-hand usage. Also pretty annoying and distorted sound at maximum volume for the bottom speaker. Full HD capture, video one, of course, should be ignored in favor of the 4K one. And I found the ultra-wide camera and the zoom to be a bit underwhelming. And the macro is pretty hard to take. We also would have liked to receive the Android 12 update by now, but we don't have it. And by the way, quick mention, for the software area, we have the fingerprint scanner here, and I would say it's decent for day-to-day use. So in the end, it's a $350 phone with a 108 megapixel camera and a way above expectation screen. That's the selling point. I would start with the battery with its 15-17 hours of life, then the 108 megapixel camera, and only then the screen, which can offer a solid video watching and gaming experience, even if you're not spending a lot of money. So that's about it. That's all we have to say about this handset, Motorola Edge 20 Lite. In some areas, it's actually more appealing than the Edge 20 or Edge 20 Pro, particularly the screen and the battery life. Bye bye.